Yeah, the Westminster Assembly was a unique time in the history of the Reformation. As we think about the 17th century, as it dawned, in England especially, the Reformation had really, while it had taken place earlier that century, as we move into from the 1500s, it would never really achieved completion. What the Westminster Assembly provided was, for, as they referred to, a further and more perfect Reformation.
Mm.
For over the decades leading up to the Reformation or to the Assembly, what had occurred was certainly dissatisfaction being expressed among the godly in the Church of England, looking for reform. They met with opposition from the church, largely through figures such as Archbishop William Laud. But all of this is being reflected through King Charles I. It is his administration, so to speak, in which this is all taking place. So now we're calling for reform. And that voice for reform is growing louder and louder as we move into the 1640s, as the decade of the 1640s starts. All of a sudden, Parliament, which is much more sympathetic to the godly or the Puritan movement, is calling for reform and has a much more powerful voice for a variety of reasons. The king must listen to a certain degree. And so they get their foot in the door. And one of the key elements they wanted to see as they negotiated with the king for changes in England, not only political, but also ecclesiastical. And so one of those changes was to let's reform the church based on a convocation or a synod of clergy from throughout the nation to help advise and to direct this reform. Well, the king certainly, among many other things that Parliament posed, refused.
Yeah.
What this finally led to, for a variety of reasons, but not to underestimate the importance of religion in initiating what came to be the English Civil War. But it did take place. So as the English Civil War was now raging, Parliament had its ability to now unilaterally bring into effect all those reforms that they were seeking earlier from Charles. And what was one of the key ones? Reforming the church. What do we need to do that? We need to bring advisors. And those advisors are clergy within the Church of England, throughout the Church of England. And so Parliament issued an invitation. It was accepted by nearly over 100 clergy throughout the nation. They assembled in 1643 and were handed the task of reform. And so this became the great power of the assembly, was its power of advising and its ability to have a hand in putting together not only a confession, but all the other documents that were necessary to reestablish the Church of England. Because remember, like many churches in the prior century of Reformation, what took place when a city or a state declared for Reformation, we recast the entire church. So it was a new confession, new forms of worship, new forms. All of these things were necessary to bring an identity to that Reformation church. And it's no different here. As the assembly is called, they're called to provide that wide landscape ecclesiastically to supply the church. Mm-hmm. But as we'll talk about, the confession becomes the key to that plan.